Fall has certainly started out on a very active note with a tropical storm hitting the east coast and some severe weather in the plains. We've got a heat wave coming to the central part of the country. How high will you go? I've got details on that and this nasty western storm that's going to impact you this week. That's all coming up in this video. Alright, thank you so much for joining me here at One Nation Weather. Let's start out by timing out your Sunday severe weather threat, which is level 2 across portions of the south central plains. Leftover storms from the overnight of your Saturday will push on down into the Arklatex region overnight, so we might see some remnant severe weather there in that area, but it's going to be the storms that fire off later in the day as we head towards 7, 8, 9 o'clock that are going to be the worst ones, and here you go, you can see them firing on up. We could see some baseball-sized hail in a widespread fashion if we get enough of these cells to develop, and you can see this is in a highly populated area there, southeastern Oklahoma, heading on down into the Dallas region, and this is going to be in the middle of the night. If you're sleeping, you might not realize that this is moving on in until it's too late. You're not going to be able to move your car. I would go ahead and have your car under something if possible for here, and definitely not a tree either with the wind damage potential. We could also see a few tornadoes. I wouldn't be shocked as well if the severe weather potential headed up towards the Midwest. But overall, your severe summary is that we have a slight risk here across portions of the south central plains, primarily northeastern Texas and southeastern Oklahoma. Scattered severe storms, mostly new ones, will initiate as we go into the late afternoon and evening time frame for your Sunday, producing very large hail, again 2 to 3 inches in diameter. Could be in a pretty widespread fashion if these storms really get so robust as to do that. And I wouldn't be shocked if this got upgraded to an enhanced risk, especially if the tornado and wind threats also go up. Now, let's take a look. You can see a low-pressure system again. It's beginning to weaken here. Today's really been the feistiest day with this storm as I'm filming this. Your first day of fall, your Saturday is when I'm doing that. You can see the remnants of Ophelia really combining with that front to make just a little bit of a messy pattern across the east. Nothing in the way of heavy precipitation over there, but where we're really beginning to see some precipitation hit hard is going to be in the Pacific Northwest this week. And look at how this looks like an atmospheric river setup that we'd see in the winter, a smaller version of that, keeping things a little bit messy there in the east as well with the remnants of that low-pressure system. But this is going to be the low-pressure system to watch this week, definitely the most powerful one hitting any part of the country, and it's going to begin to spill some of its moisture over into the mountain west as well. And that could interact with a heat wave in the plains, and I'll talk about that later and how that could create some severe weather. Now, this week's patterns to watch, again, number one is that new storm system entering portions of the Pacific Northwest. I'd say the next pattern to watch is definitely going to be that heat wave, and then kind of a third pattern that's not really as important, but certainly something to keep an eye on is how messy that we might stay along the east coast here, as well as in towards Florida and the Gulf Coast. That could initiate maybe some weak tropical development down the line, but nothing as strong as Ophelia as I see it right now. So let's talk about the strong storm to enter the Pacific Northwest. We're going to see plenty of wind gusts in excess of 30 to 40 miles per hour as the storm pushes on in. A strong storm system will hit the Pacific Northwest this week. This comes as a very feisty dip in the polar jet stream, will allow energy to spill in. And we're talking about a big dip, and what that really does is it instigates more precipitation and strong storm systems while it's there, and brings in cooler air if you're in that dip. So you can see right there in that picture on the left side of your screen, that's where our coolest air would be offshore. But once that dip makes it onshore, not only do we get those storms, we get the cooler air to rush in behind it, and you can see a lot of the mountains will slow this down as we head through the week. But rainfall totals up to 6 inches of rain may fall for us here in the Seattle area, especially as we see some of these storms bank up against the mountains. So let's time out really the wind energy with the storm. Again, you can see how big of a dip we see here, and this is really strong. You can even see an eye to the low pressure system, so to speak, in this case, really broadening out for us as it pushes on off towards the north and brings that energy in a slightly weaker state onto the northwestern coast. Overall, though, we're going to see quite the energy pushing on into the mountain west. This could bring more snow into portions of some of the higher elevations and the ski resorts there. Notice how most of this energy is going to dodge the south and west for us here. It's going to be in the northwest mainly. But if we can get low-pressure systems to ride up that polar jet stream as it continues pushing east, and especially with this new dip, that's where we would definitely watch out for more of that cooler air to spill eastward and create a nasty fall cold blast behind a big heat wave, and those two air masses colliding could certainly instigate some severe thunderstorms. Again, so that's something I'd watch down the line. But let me tell you about the mid-range. This dip in the jet stream will drag cool, moist air that is quite unseasonable for this time of the year. We're going to get slightly above average precipitation levels in this region for sure, and well below below average temperatures, but you can see some of those oranges and reds off towards the right side. We'll talk about those. Again, that's coming up in just a minute. Now, morning lows, Saturday, this is your September 30th, so it's fast forwarding a week ahead. Look at what this cold blast could really do. This is going to be a trough, this is going to be a cold front, and this is going to be a strong one. And again, if we can get these to interact with some of that heat in the plains, I would watch out. 20s and 30s at night, maybe even some teens in the higher elevations for us. This is going to be some of the chilliest air of the season for sure. Now, we have that cold air along the west coast, but look at how the heat is going to be building in comparison to that into portions of the upper Midwest. We're going to see some 90s, y'all. Temperatures as we start the week for you here on your Saturday and into your Sunday, we're going to see some temperatures get, a few degrees below average, especially into portions of Texas, but overall, the temperature patterns are quite tame across most of the country. Look at this. Here we go into our Monday afternoon. Not really anybody seeing anything beyond about 10 degrees departure, except there being a little bit cooler than average along the west coast. The Mountain West, notice at least warm for now, but we'll see the cooler dip dive into that area. Here we go towards our Tuesday. Notice keeping things warm across the plains. We do have the remnant energy from that low pressure system, and that's going to keep things cooler through most of the week in the plains, but then look at how this heat builds up. I think it's once we get past Wednesday, Thursday, and into our Friday, Saturday when we see these temperatures get anywhere from 10 to 20 degrees above average, maybe even up to 25 degrees above average into portions of the Dakotas and Minnesota as we head towards the very last days of the month. And that, again, in contrast with some of the 20 to 30 degree departures that would be moving into portions of Nevada and the west. The East Coast staying fairly tame in the temperature department, which has been how it's been really for a few weeks now. 90s could surge to the Midwest with this system. Again, I can't stress this enough. This is abnormal heat for this time of the year. This is not summer heat, but this certainly will feel like it at times, especially if we can get some of that humidity to work on up into this region, with temperatures well into the 90s from portions of Texas all the way up to Nebraska and Iowa, and making a run at the 90s for sure for us there in the Dakotas and Minnesota. And this is as we head towards your Saturday afternoon, by the way, that same day, September 30th, that I was talking about for your lows in the Northwest just a minute ago. This storm looks very much so like my thumbnail that I had recently of the system that's just been moving through the plains and been the other deal other than Ophelia. So this is really interesting. If we could see the setup happen again, we could see more severe weather and maybe even more feisty storms depending on that. But for now, let's talk about what's going to happen here along the East Coast with that potential slightly messy weather. Again, here's the remnants of Ophelia really making a mess in the mid-Atlantic through the rest of the weekend. And even as we start your work week, unfortunately, we're still going to have that there. Front pushing in from the west, but again, that's weakening as that low pressure system is just falling apart there over the Midwest, but it'll take some time to do that, and as it does so, what is left of it will fall apart over portions of the south and east, so we might see a little bit of precipitation there along that I-85 corridor. But look at how this precipitation is really sinking on down from Ophelia as well and gets caught up in that front's flow. And I would certainly monitor some of these areas from portions of Bermuda all the way back down to the Gulf Coast for just some minor tropical development or some sort of extra tropical system. And look at how this continues just spinning around. We see a lot of precipitation over Florida from this especially, keeping things overall pretty cloudy, I would say, and slightly unsettled along the East Coast as this persists, even as we head towards say your 28th, your 29th, this is as we're talking about the end of the work week. And then here we go, the European model showing, look at why this moisture is here. We have this front really sitting all the way from portions of the far northern Atlantic, curling all the way back. And this system didn't necessarily even really impact the U.S., but it is really impacting the way the tropical outlook is looking for us. And again, notice how we have some of these areas that are going to get picked up and thrown to the northeast by that front. So that's good news. But again, tail ends of fronts can always spin something up in the European model, certainly showing something here forming near Bermuda as we had about 10 days out. Again, something to monitor. I like to look at those long-term trends, but I do not like to say they're set in stone either. But again, just with all this energy sitting around, yes, some rain for the Gulf Coast and the East Coast continuing. Could bring some northeastern cool winds as well into the East Mid-Atlantic as well. Thanks so much for watching, and go ahead and like and subscribe.